Today, we're going to be learning the fundamentals of animation in Fusion, along with a bunch of really awesome motion graphics techniques. We're going to learn about keyframes and easing and masking and how to take a regular logo and add some motion and some character to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I know you're going to learn a ton. All right, so here I am in the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve. I just have a blank Fusion composition going on here, and I'm going to do a couple things to get started. The first thing is go over to the very left icon here and grab a background and drag that into the flow. Take the output, the little gray square, and plug that into the input of the media out, and that'll give us a black screen. Yes, this will be the perfect canvas for us to make our things. The other thing I'm going to do is go up to Workspace and uncheck Show Page Navigation, just so that we have a little bit more room to mess around with our nodes here. There we go. Now we're ready. Instead of black, let's make this almost white. Something like that. Just call that good for now. And we're going to be learning some animation while making this kind of logo reveal. So let's grab our logo. Here in the media pool, I have a couple of images here. I have this logo that's just been made in a vector program, and it's for a company called Ski Bear. It's not a real company, but I think that would be fun, you know, to have one called Ski Bear. You own the mountain, you see, because bears like mountain. Okay. Anyway, this Ski Bear logo actually is supposed to have these little highlights there. I think that really helps a lot. But I have these brought in as two separate images because I want to animate the little highlights in his goggles. And I figured it'd be easier to have this as reference, but be able to turn it off by clicking this little switch for our merge like this. So we're going to recreate those and animate those ourselves. But this is good to kind of start out and just mock this up. So we have our logo, and I'll take the output of this logo and put that into the output of our background, and that'll automatically make a merge node, put the logo in the foreground, and now we have Ski Bear over our composition here. It's a little bit big, so let's take a transform node and plug this in right here. And let's take the size down, size that nicely. All right, so if we didn't want anything to move, we'd be done, baby. But this wouldn't be much of an animation tutorial if I didn't animate anything, right? So basic animation in Fusion is based all on keyframes. So what is a keyframe? A keyframe is telling a certain property to be a certain value at a certain time, okay? What the heck does that mean? Well, if we were to select our transform, which we just kind of scaled this down, I brought down this size slider to 0.61, okay? And this slider controls the size of anything that we run through it. But we can change this slider over time by kind of saving this number to a frame on our time slider here. So at frame 0, we could have this size be 0.542. And we save that number by clicking this little diamond right here and turning that red. So now Fusion is going to take this transform and it's going to make sure that it's 0.542 at frame 0. Now I can take this slider and move this down a few frames. So let's just move it to the end of the comp. What the heck? Frame 119. And now we can tell this size to be a different number. So we could push this up a little bit, have it kind of zoom in, and you'll see as we touch this, it turns on this keyframe, and it also gives us a little arrow here. That's so we can jump in between the two keyframes. So here, that jumps to frame 0, and if I click on this right arrow, boom, that jumps our time slider to frame 119. And in between, it just animates in between those values. Okay, so that's the basics of how that works. You have keyframes that save a value for a property at a certain frame, and then Fusion automatically does stuff in between the frames to animate it. Now, to get a better look at these keyframes, we have two different panels in Fusion. One of them, surprisingly, is called keyframes. So if we click on that, that opens up our keyframes panel down here, and I'll click this little button to push our inspector up, just give us a little room. And the keyframes panel will look something like this for you, most likely. I think that it's less confusing to go up here to these three dots and make sure we have show only selected tools selected, because then that's only going to show the node that we have selected, which if we select their transform, we'll be able to see the keyframes from our animation on this transform node. If I twirl this transform down like this, we can see these white lines, and each one of those is a keyframe. And in between, we have sort of a graph. Let's actually zoom this in a little more. If you go to this button right here, this zoom to fit button, and click that once, that will scale your view to kind of stretch this out so you can actually see things and work with them. And from here, you can grab either of these keyframes and you can move them around. And so I can make the animation shorter by decreasing the distance between these keyframes. Have this last about 30 frames. So as I play this back, this scales up and then stops right at frame 30, and then nothing happens after that. So this keyframes panel is where you can grab those keyframes and move them back and forth in time really easily. Also, if you have multiple things animated, like let's say I wanted to animate the angle here, I can just move to the frame that I want. So let's say frame 0 and make a keyframe for our angle there, and then go to another frame, let's just say frame 60, and I can push up this angle like this. And now it'll animate in between those two keyframes. We'll see the little white tick marks on our timeline ruler here. And we'll also see two different graphs on our keyframes panel. purple one is for size and the green one is for angle. And so I can kind of compare the timing of these by moving these back and forth. I can select multiple keyframes by box selecting like this and move those together. I can select all of these and move them back and forth like this. And so this is how you would adjust the timing of things. So I'll just stretch that out like that. And now throughout the comp, this zooms in and turns. Now, let's say I don't like this angle animation. I can select both of these keyframes and just hit backspace. That'll get rid of those. But I still have my angle animated. And really the only way to get rid of this animation is to go up to angle here, right click, and just say remove transform one angle. That'll just remove that animation. So we'll just keep this simple right now. We'll just have this zoom up a little bit like that. And we'll get into refining the keyframes a little bit more here in a minute. For now, I'm just going to close the keyframes panel. We'll get back into that later. And we already have a basic animation going, which is nice. But let's add some fanciness. I like these words, but I don't want them to start on the screen. I want those to kind of animate in. And I think it'd be interesting to have these words kind of come out of nowhere. And we can kind of think of this white background as like snow. So they kind of rise out of the snow like that. So we'll have the ski bear rise out of the snow. And we can do this a lot of different ways. I think what I'll do is take this media in 1. Let's go ahead and rename this. I'll hit F2 to rename it. We'll just call this logo. And then this media in 2, this is the shine. So the shine is there, the logo is this. And so in between our logo and our shine, I could do this a couple different ways. I could take this exact logo like this and just copy and paste it, merge it over itself. And then I could just limit this with a mask. So I could take this rectangle, plug it into my logo. I'll just drag my logo up here to the viewer and adjust my mask to just select the ski bear part like that. And that'd be just fine. We'd also want to do a similar thing for our original logo. So let's just put a rectangle mask here and we're just going to limit where this is drawn. So we're just kind of selecting the part that we want to draw. So we have our logo that's limited to the mask with no text. And then we have the logo that's limited to the mask with just the text. We could do a similar thing, copy, double click off and hit paste, take the output of this and run that in like that. We could select this with the mask as well. Select the own the mountain part, this, just put that mask right around those words. There we go. Now we have those all isolated. So we have our logo, we have just the words and just the green words. So let's call this ski bear. And this one, own the mountain. All right, so we have this kind of split up. Remember, you can always do this with a logo, even if you don't have a bunch of different layers, especially if there's space in between. If this has transparency and it's just really easy to mask one part, you can always kind of break this up into different parts and animate them separately. The other thing I could do would be to just recreate this text here in Fusion, but that's a little more work than this, and we don't need to do that. So now that we have these separated, we can animate them separately. So for instance, the ski bear, now we can take something like a transform and plug that in between our ski bear and our merge like this. And now I have a little handle where I can move the ski bear text by itself using this transform. And a little trick is if you're designing for your end position, like we want it to be here when everything is done animating, you can start on a later frame, like let's say frame 24, and set your keyframe there. So we'll keyframe the center. That's just the position of this text. See if we move this back and forth, it kind of moves that back and forth. And then you can go to an earlier keyframe and put this wherever you want it to animate from. So I can just maybe bring this down a lot like that. We'll have that kind of rise out of the snow like this. Good. So that kind of comes out of the bottom, but we don't want to see it under there. And so we can add another mask, maybe just to our merge here. Just grab a rectangle mask, plug that into the mask input of our merge like this. And let's just put this here above our words. And so now when this animates on, only appears within that mask. So it looks like it rises out of nothing. Isn't that cool? So easy to do. So now we have that rising in, and let's take a look at our final product here. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's looking sweet. By the way, if you're new to Fusion, all of these nodes can be really confusing. That's why I made this free workshop, the 9 nodes that you need to make almost anything in Fusion. It goes over the main nodes that I use for so much stuff. If you want to make motion graphics or effects in Fusion, this is a must watch, and it's my gift free to you. Make sure to click that card or there's a link in the description. Let's get back to it. And now that we have that basic movement down, let's talk about a pretty important concept when it comes to animating, and that is easing. So easing is how fast or slow something moves into a keyframe. So if we go back to our keyframes here and I select this transform 2, roll this down, we have this little graph in between these keyframes. It starts down here and it goes just a straight line all the way up to here. These are the values in between these two keyframes and how it's animating in between them. It's doing them by just drawing a straight line, and that's just called linear keyframe easing. Say that with me, linear keyframe easing. You could also call that no easing because it's just drawing a straight line. And what that means is that once this approaches this last keyframe, it just instantly stops. And so when this comes in, it just kind of jerks to a stop and it doesn't look that great. It just looks okay. So wouldn't it be nice if we could adjust this little graph to not be a straight line and have it kind of slow down before it reached this last keyframe? If we close the keyframes panel and open up the spline panel, we can select whatever we are animating. So I'll select displacement. And again, by the way, I have these 3 dots here. I have show only selected tool selected here. If I don't, there's other stuff that shows up. So I like to have just show only selected tool. And now we have this same graph, but there's a difference. We can select one of these keyframes and look, we have this little handle and we can move this around to change the graph. And so if I change this graph and I take this handle out like this, and I make it almost level with this little keyframe and bring it out, check out the difference in this animation. Oh man, it's just buttery smooth. Look at that. Oh, looks pro. So good. This movement slows down before it stops, which makes it look more realistic, lots more pleasing to the eye. It's just all around a better time, okay? And so for the most part, unless you're going for a really specific effect, you want these graphs to have a nice smooth stop at the top. You can pretend that you're driving in a Jeep, right? And you're going up a mountain. You want to go up this nice, easy mountain, right? If the mountain looks like this, or even worse like this, up at the top, you're going to have a rough time. You're going to bottom out. Kids are going to be throwing up in the back. It's just going to be a disaster. Look at this garbage. Shunk. It does have a cool kind of like clicking in effect, which if you're going for something like that, if you want something to kind of feel like it snaps in, that might be a good way to do it. But for the most part, if you're just animating something in, you probably don't want that kind of movement. You want it nice and easy. In fact, you can select a keyframe here and hit F on the keyboard to flatten out that handle, F for flatten. And you can hold down Alt and grab this handle and pull it out to make that nice, big, easy curve. Yeah. There we go. So anything you animate, you pretty much want to have that curve on it. The only exception would be is if it's at the very beginning or the very end of an animation, you don't really need to do that because we just cut away, right? So nobody cares that there's no easing on this because it's just moving when it's starting and it keeps moving all the way until the end. And so there's no reason for it to start or stop at either end of our composition. So we have Ski Bear rising up out of nothing. So far, we've done a couple different animations. We have this zoom animation and we have the text rising up. Those are both transform animations. So they're happening in a transform node, but it's also the things that we're animating are the transform properties like the center or the position, right? The size, the angle, whether something's flipped, that kind of thing is animating where something is, how it's positioned, how it's aligned. And that's just one kind of animation that you can do because you'll notice while we have these little keyframe icons next to our transform controls, we also have those icons next to basically every control in the inspector. For instance, this own the mountain is being put on our composition with this merge. So if I turn this merge off, it disappears. I can animate this blend property, which is like the opacity of this layer. I can just pull this over here. I can take the blend and just bring it down like that and kind of fade this out. And so I can animate this blend to fade something on or off in our composition, right? So after Ski Bear comes up, let's start to fade this in, maybe at frame 22. And I'll just click the blend right there, turn it all the way down. And then I want this to appear, let's say by frame 40, push that all the way up like that. It doesn't have to be exactly frame 40. Remember, we can move these keyframes afterwards. We just want some kind of basic rough timing here. So Ski Bear, own the mountain. Yes, that actually works pretty well. Ski Bear, own the mountain. So we can really animate any property and it works exactly the same. We've animated this blend using the exact same way. I can open these keyframes and I can move these keyframes around just like I did for the transform. I can even hold control and select the transform and the merge, and I can look at both of these and how the timing kind of works with each other. So maybe I don't want this to start coming in until the Ski Bear has completely stopped. We can have it start a lot earlier just by sliding it over. That works. We can have it take a lot longer to happen. This is kind of a weird thing. I can't grab one of these keyframes while this blend is selected. If I select the merge like this, then I can grab the keyframes individually. Just kind of a weird thing. But now let's have that blend in a little bit slower. Yeah, I think Own the Mountain should come in after. Yes, good. That's looking nice. So we have our animation set up here. We have Ski Bear on the mountain. It's looking pretty good. Now let's get a little bit crazier. Let's animate the reflections in his glasses here. So like I was saying, we brought this in as a separate image, separate layer. And again, I can just select this merge one and turn it off and on. That's going to turn on and off that layer. Now, I brought this in mostly just for reference because I want to recreate this and then animate it here in Fusion. Because I could do something like grab this shine and maybe put a transform after after it like this, and I can move it back and forth, but it's not gonna really work. It's gonna be kind of weird. So we'll need to do something a little bit different. So something to pay attention to is that this logo is on a different size canvas than our composition. Our canvas is 2000 by 2000 for this logo image that we imported. And that's totally okay, but we just have to be aware of that and be really careful when we're masking things. If I were to mask something here in our media out, like looking at our media out here in our second viewer, I could draw a mask and it won't really be the right size. It'll kind of look like I'm doing a good thing here. Like I could grab a polygon mask and start to do some work here. If I wanted to like draw a mask around his goggles here, I'll just do a terrible job just because this isn't going to work. So I don't want to spend a million hours on it. Okay. So now we do that. And then we just say, okay, I'm going to mask something now. So I'll take like, I don't know, a background, merge it over, and then apply my polygon to it. And look what's happening. It's like being super weird, right? That's because the sizing is off, and it's also because we're running this through a transform. And so anything that you're masking, what you really want to do is like bring up the actual image that you're masking. So like this logo, I'll just bring this up in our second viewer. And I also want to mask on something that's the same size as this. So this is 2000 by 2000. Let's go ahead and make a background and merge it over, but look how it's missized. If we take this background like this and go over to image and uncheck auto resolution and type 2000 by 2000 like this, now that fills up our entire canvas. And we'll just bring this in our second viewer here. We just have black over nothing. And I'll just apply a mask to our background. And now we're kind of set up to do a good job here. Okay, so again, I'll just do something quick. Just check the size. Anytime you're not sure about something sizing or if it's going to work, just do a really quick one and see if it's acting the way you think it should act. Okay, so now we have that. Let's view our media out and look, everything's going okay. It animates with it. The mask isn't great, but it's sized right. There's nothing froggy going on. So now I'll go back to my merge 5 here where I'm just putting my background over my foreground. I'll select all of this and make a new mask. Let's do a good job on this mask now. And I actually want to give a little bit of space around this because like the shine isn't really touching the edges. And so I'm just going to draw and have a little space around it like this. If you mess up, you can always go back and adjust it later. Look, this is wonky donk. This is crazy sauce. Okay. It's not quite right, but we can always adjust it. Always adjust things. Anytime you make a mistake in life, go back and fix it. It's no problem.
I can fix that.
Just finish this up, make sure it looks about right all around. Nice thing is we don't have to make this perfect. It's going to work just fine how it is. Yeah, that looks nice. And now we can use this background here. We can just make this a different color if we want to. It doesn't matter. We're never going to see this background, but make it green, let's say. This is where our new reflection is going to be allowed to show up. In fact, we're going to do something crazy here. Instead of plugging this green background into the green input of our merge, I'm going to unhook that and just bring this down here like this. And I'm going to plug it into our mask input this. So it's the same thing, but we're just using the mask for whatever we plug into the foreground here. So if I had some text, let's say, and I plug that into the foreground of our merge, I typed some stuff and I moved this text around, we could only see it inside of the glasses, only inside of that mask that I have, okay? Which you see what we're doing here. We get some reflection going on. Now we have our shine here for our reference. And I think what we'll do is we'll just make a background and I'll just color pick this same white, plug that into our merge here. And we'll just take something like a rectangle and we'll just make a tall rectangle like this. And we're gonna make something that's sort of like this reflection. So that's one rectangle like that. And then let's just copy, hit Control C, double click off and hit Control V and plug that into our rectangle here. Then we'll move this over and then change that width. So now we can kind of make our own little reflection here. Which one's the real one? You don't even know because we did such a good job, right? Let's just take both of these. Let's move this over to pretty much match our other reflections here like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to know. Let's rename these ref skinny. This will be ref wide. Let's take both of these, copy, Control C, double click off, Control V, and just plug those into that. So now it's just stacking all these masks and we'll move these over to where they're supposed to be like this. Boom. Okay. So now if we turn off this shine, we still have basically what we had, pretty similar, but instead of this image that's already cut, we have this background that's nice and big. In fact, we can take these wide things and push up the height a little bit if we're worried about it. And we have lots and lots of room to move these around because it's not cut off by the image. It's being limited later by this mask. And we'll see there's plenty of room to move this around in the mask. And so look at this magic. Look at what's going to happen now. Bring this up into our viewer. And now if I grab all of this stuff and maybe put that through a transform, I can take this transform and move this center and look at that. Look at that majesty. Look at this handsome man getting mad reflecting. He's like on a silent retreat. He's so reflective. So now we have this reflection that we can animate to our heart's content. And let's do it. Again, again, this is just another transform reflection, right? So let's have it end up there. Let's say at 30 frames, let's keyframe the center. And then at frame 0, we'll just kind of push this over a little bit like that. And now, oh boy, let's have that not stop so suddenly just by opening the spline, selecting our displacement here. Again, I'll just hit F on the keyboard, hold down Alt and drag this out. Now we have this shwoom. Yeah. Oh, it's looking so good. All right, let's look at our immediate out, which is our final comp here. See where we're at. See how Ski Bear's rocking. Yeah, he's so cool. Dang it. This is such a cool thing to do. It's so simple, so easy. Yes. All right, so this is sweet. I love it, but it needs some spice. Since we have kind of a snowy theme going on here, why don't we add a little bit of snow over it? How do we do such things, you ask? Well, we're actually going to do a little bit of cheating. Let's go ahead and grab this second icon, this fast noise, grab that, and we'll take the output of that, drag it over the output of merge 2, and look at that. We got some fog going on. Why is that? That's because fast noise, or to drag this up here, this makes fog. And so I can push up the detail here, mess with the scale. And we see it kind of makes these clouds like that. And so we can add this kind of like snowstorm looking thing over our graphics without a lot of work here. We just have the fast noise over it. Let's look at this before the fast noise. I'm gonna select this fast noise, go to the color, and this color too, which is the white color, I'm gonna go ahead and pick this background color because it's not quite white. It's like 0.81. Then the only thing that changes is our logo. We aren't adding white or anything to the background. This kind of appears out of nothing. So this is cool, but something really neat about fast noise is if you go up to noise here, down here where it says seethe, if you push this around, it kind of animates the clouds, and you could certainly animate that however you want, but you could also just push up seethe rate, and that will automatically kind of animate this as the playhead goes. And so we have a little bit of this movement in our clouds, and we can combine that with stuff we've learned about animating the center of things. And look at this, push the center around. Now we have this movement going on. Looks like there's, you know, foggy snow fog moving through here, and we could easily just click this at the beginning and then go to the end and move this over like that. And we'll have a little bit of what we need. Super easy to do. But I do want to show you one little trick with this. I'm just going to double click on center to get rid of our animation. And then we're going to add an expression to this, which is just going to animate this automatically, kind of like seethe rate does. This way we don't have to worry about keyframes. We can just kind of like have it always animating. So if I select this and hit equals and then enter, that's how you add a expression. And the expression it's going to want is a point. So by default, it would be like point and then parentheses 0.5 comma 0.5. And that's going to give us the same result. Instead of 0.5 here, if I type time, look what happens. This makes this center to be the number of frame that we're on, which is way too crazy for what we're doing. We can do some quick maths.
2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1, that's 3, quick maths.
And do something like time divided by 300. And look at that. Now we're getting something much more tasteful. Oh, baby. And now we always have that snow going across our logo, and we don't even have to do anything. We didn't even have to set keyframes. So that's pretty neat. The only thing I'll do now is I think I'll limit this with a mask too. And so we can do that either on the fast noise or on the merge, doesn't really matter. I'll take a polygon and just plug that into the merge. And let's just kind of highlight bottom part here, just with a little shape, and then soften out that edge. You can take a look at that shape that I'm making here like this. Just make sure that's a really soft edge like that. And now we have just little wisps happening, just little whispers, right? That's so cool. I think maybe I want it a little bit more on the words than on the bottom of the bear's face. Now we get that. Oh, looks so cool. And maybe I don't even want that the whole time, maybe just for a little bit. So let's actually animate this merge, and let's have it full strength most of the time, but about 30. Let's start taking that blend down, take it down by like frame 50 or so. So now this will just start blending down. Okay. Again, we'll open up the spline panel, can select both of these and hit F to make sure that we have nice smooth transitions. Yeah. I feel like that's a little fast though. Open up our keyframes here. We'll just make this a little bit slower. Now this just fades out ever so slightly. Yes, Ski Bear, baby. So this is our node tree for our Ski Bear. Let's kind of break this down before we finish up here. We're starting with our logo, and we have a rectangle mask just to limit that. We're just cutting out the text. Then we're putting our reflections on it, which we made just by masking a background. That's that kind of white color. And that's being put over our glasses with this mask that we drew. After that, we're adding our Ski Bear font, and we animated that coming up. Then we have the Own the Mountain animating in just with that blend. Then we used to have our shine on top of this just as reference, but we turned it off. We could totally just delete these nodes and that would be fine too. And then all of that is going through a transform, and that's just zooming this in slightly. That's being merged over our white background like this. And on top of that, we're adding our little snow fast noise that's being animated both with our seethe rate and our little expression on our X of our center, which is just time divided by 300. And that just pushes things to the right slowly while the seed kind of changes the shape of the clouds. And that all comes together beautifully with our ski bear logo. So sweet. I love making clean animations like this. Oh, it's so much fun and it's so easy too. What was your favorite thing you learned today? I want to know. Put them down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. By the way, if you don't know me, my name is Casey and I teach video editors how to use Fusion and make amazing visual effects and motion graphics. And I love doing that. And I love that you're here. So if you want more of that, well, why don't you stick around? Why don't you check out the 9 Nodes workshop, which is right here and it's available for free. And then maybe check out this video here that's also good. Okay? That sounds like a good deal to me. That sounds like just a capital idea.